My family was released from the IDP camp because of our background as religious leaders. That was also why our living conditions were better. We had a cement floor, but around us, others weren't so lucky. They said it would have been better to die in the war than suffer in the camps. We may have left, but it pains me to think of our relatives who are still there under a lot of hardship. Life was frustrating. We had to queue for everything. When we wanted water, we had to queue in the hot afternoon sun. It was exhausting. We queued for food, we queued to use the toilet. It was so frustrating. It was very uncomfortable when it rained. That's when everyone in the camp will gather and demand to be freed. I know of people who died from lack of medicine. 3 in my camp died because of this and dysentery. I was sick for 21 days. I went to the hospital but had to turn back because it was too crowded. It happened a few times. I had malaria. It was my mother's herbal medicine that finally cured me.
Leaving Manic Farm, Sambandar AIYA and his family were allowed to resettle with their relatives in BATTICALOA. Like many released refugees, they can't go back to their home states in the north. As Colombo says, soldiers are still demining the region. Sambandar AIYA is among some 40,000 refugees the government has released from IDP camps up till mid-September. That number remains a fraction of the 250,000 or more IDPs still held in camps, waiting for officials to verify if they are Tamil Tiger cadres or supporters. To Sambandar AIYA's disappointment, his sister is still among them.
She's still in the camp. Her husband is abroad, and since they're not religious leaders, she has not been released. I just hope they can let her go as soon as possible.
We have to ensure that there is a comprehensive, proper screening process. There are many hundreds of thousands more, millions in fact outside, who are at risk if the suicide cadres are just allowed to come out.
In the face of widespread international criticism, Colombo points to the east of the country to show how, given time, the situation can improve. Prior to the final attacks in the north, intense fighting occurred in this region. The waters off the eastern shores used to be heavily monitored by the military during the war due to security concerns. The tension has eased over the last 2 years as the government regained control over this region. And that has changed the lives of fishermen here.
We suffered during the war, living in fear all the time. We could not get good prices for our fish. Now it's much better because all 3 communities, Tamils, Sinalis, Muslims, we work together. That also gives us a bigger market for our catch. We hardly even mixed with each other in the past. Now we work together.
We have liberated them. We are now in the process of accelerating the development in those areas. In the east, for example, after we liberated, we immediately put in place an accelerated development program.
But critics say there was a difference from day one in the east. The displaced Tamils enjoyed freedom of movement and were not kept in IDP camps against their will.
I call them prison camps, not IDP camps. If you call them welfare centers, it is a joke, it's a comedy.
MANO GANESAN is an opposition MP for Colombo district. He also founded the Civil Monitoring Commission, a human rights group. He's frustrated that he can't visit the camps up north. While the UN and other aid groups have been granted access, organizations like his face rejection from the government whenever they try to go.
There is no transparency. No human rights groups are allowed to function independently and professionally. Everything is conducted through and by the military.
Well, we have had bad experiences because some of the NGOs, some of the organizations who said that they want to go and visit the place, they have been taking people, they have been trying to smuggle people out.
While the government might have prevented such smuggling with its tight access restrictions, it hasn't stopped people from going missing. An administrator in VINYA, where Manic Farm is, recently made a startling revelation. A fresh head count showed 10,000 IDPs missing from the camp and unaccounted for, prompting speculation from critics. Were they taken away by the authorities? What happened to them?
We have repeatedly told the government to announce, declare the names and identities of the people who have come into the camps or who are taken away from the camps. Nobody is coming out in the government with responsibility. As a difference of about 10,000 people going missing. Where are they gone?
How do you feel about a report like that?
Well, I would say it may be a little exaggerated, but I'm not ruling out.
But what the government has ruled out are allegations of extrajudicial killings by the military. This unauthenticated video clip appears to show men in Sri Lankan army uniforms executing Tamil prisoners. Sources in Sri Lanka released it this year to the UK's Channel 4 News. The footage spread like wildfire internationally. Colombo immediately issued a blanket denial, insisting it was fabricated. Its ministers then held a media conference after a 10-day investigation, with their invited experts pointing out loopholes in the clip. It included a slow-motion analysis showing how one dead man's leg appeared to move.
If they have gone up to the extent of fabricating, this is below any general norms and practices, and I would say the kind of low level of journalism that are crept into this system.
The strained relationship extends to local media critical of the government. Its Terrorism Investigation Division arrested journalist J.S. Tissanayagam after he wrote articles criticizing the government's treatment of Tamils affected by the war. In August, the High Court found him guilty of causing racial hatred and supporting terrorism. The sentence, 20 years of hard labor.
The message that is sending out is a shocking, chilling statement that anyone who dares criticize the government will have horrendous punitive consequences.
Some believe the assassination of newspaper editor Lasantha Wickramatunge to be one such consequence. In January, two men on a motorcycle stopped his car in the morning rush hour traffic and gunned him down. The attack took place 100 meters away from an Air Force checkpoint in a high-security area. But until today, the gunmen remain at large. Wickramatunge was known as a harsh critic of both the government and the Tamil Tigers. His brother Lal is the managing director of the Sunday Leader newspaper, where he was the editor. Lal told me gunmen and arsonists have attacked the paper at least 9 times in the past 15 years.
We find that during the last year and a half or two, journalists have been targeted time and again. So there has been a systematic approach towards journalists which has led them to self-censor, and this, with the impunity that this is done, there has been fear instilled into the journalists. If this could have been done to Lasantha, then anybody is fair game.
Since 2004, more than 30 people working for Sri Lankan media organizations have been killed. This, according to press freedom advocates here. And many more have been abducted, assaulted and threatened for their reports on the civil conflict. In last year's Press Freedom Index by Reporters Without Borders, Sri Lanka ranked 165 out of 173 nations. It's the lowest ranking of any democratic country. The lack of independent information on IDP camps has also hampered aid sanctioned by the government. Dr. VINYA ARIYARATNE heads Sri Lanka's biggest NGO that provides basic needs like food and health care for the refugees.
It would have been much better if we had known exactly what the resettlement plan is in terms of numbers, where they are going to resettle. Without knowing that, it's like you keep on indefinitely supporting relief which has put us in a very difficult situation. We will not be able to maintain the quality of services that we are maintaining now. There will be a big health impact. People will suffer, there will be disease, there will be deaths.
Meanwhile, in Batticaloa, Sambandar Aya's prayers were answered. Before we parted ways, he received word that his sister and her children had just been released from Manic Farm. They would be resettled with her in-laws up north in Jaffna.
I long to go back to the temple in my village. I want to return the religious statues that I took with me when we fled. I want to go back and serve the temple again.
But they will have to wait for the government to complete its intensive demining work in the north before they can all go home.
We never thought that the mission would be so gigantic. The LTTE has even laid mines in paddy fields to prevent people from enjoying a livelihood.
It's in the interest, I think, of the government and of the country that the people start moving back sooner, because that will give them confidence, that will put the country together. The longer they're there, the harder it's going to be.
History shows how deeply entrenched ethnic tensions bred the rise of the LTTE. To hold the country together, some believe Tamils should have a degree of self-rule in the north. It's a prospect the government will not entertain. So while the military may have destroyed the rebels, Colombo faces a different battle now to win hearts and minds for national reconciliation.